What's happening, everybody? On today's show, Jake Crain of Crain and Company is going to join us to give us his insight on this upcoming SEC football season. We'll see who he's high on and who he's not. Also, some camp updates from around the conference, including Georgia, Arkansas, LSU, Texas A&M, and more. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Remember, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, plenty to jump into. Let's jump right into it. Let's go around the conference.
Boots out to the right. Intercepted.
Takes the handoff.
What a catch.
Around the conference.
SEC teams getting underway with their fall camp this week. Several reporting to campus, several already hitting the practice field. And so we jump in to give you some daily updates throughout this week and the next couple weeks with what's going on. We start over at Georgia as Kirby Smart updating the media on some of his injury situations as they get into it. Inside linebacker Small Munden and running back Branson Robinson. Both are running, but not going full speed practicing. Kirby said they're ahead of schedule from 5 or 6 weeks ago, but still not cleared to practice. Defensive lineman Michael Williams doing some football activity at a lower volume, and fellow D-lineman Tyrion Ingram Dawkins dealing with a stress reaction in a foot, but it's not a break. Kirby said it's a goal of training camp to establish that physical and mental toughness. How do you do that? You don't go out and say, oh, God, please don't get hurt. Look, football's tough. It's a dangerous sport. We practice as smart as anybody in the country. We feel like we have a method that allows us to be physical and be tough, but also protect our players. So Xavier Sori, he's expected to step into a larger role while Munden is limited. Smart said the most growth that Sori has seen has come in the last couple of months. He said since Munden's injury, Sori has grown exponentially in terms of confidence, his ability to execute. He's been healthy. He's had a lot of opportunity and reps and that sort of thing. So maybe a name to keep an eye on there. S-O-R-E-Y, Sori at linebacker for the Georgia Bulldogs. Obviously, a lot of focus on the quarterbacks there at Georgia camp. Kirby saying when it comes to the quarterbacks, he wants to see them be where their feet are. Worry about today's walkthrough, today's recovery period, the meetings, whatever we're allowed to have. And the only thing you should worry about is that. So tonight, you start worrying about tomorrow. But for the quarterbacks, it's not to overwhelm them with the results. It's to overwhelm themselves with a process of getting better. He went on to talk about Carson Beck's leadership traits, and he said, look, it's not a highs and lows. Beck is not really an emotional guy. He's not a real fiery guy. He's very laid back. He understands his job. He's very intelligent. Every leader has their own way. He certainly commands the room. I think the players around him understand how smart he is. Carson's had a lot of reps and a lot of work. They just all haven't been game reps. So he has a huge, massive reps. He's had a huge, massive reps against a good defense. His leadership method is still kind of being developed. So no different than Gunnar Stockton and Brock Vandagriff. They each have different ways about them. Look, I think it's only a matter of time here before, officially say, all right, Carson Beck is the guy. That's it. And let's roll with him at Georgia. But look, I'm very high on him. He's my dark horse Heisman pick. Carson Beck. So if you can get some good odds on him, jump on that. All right, moving around the conference over at LSU, a little bit of a scare the other day as defensive line coach Jimmy Lindsey was rushed to the hospital at the LSU training facility. LSU announcing yesterday he will step away from the program to deal with a personal health matter. Coach Brian Kelly saying Jimmy Lindsey will step away from the LSU program dealing with a personal health matter. In Coach Lindsey's absence, Coach John Jancic will serve as defensive line coach, and Bob Diaco will coach the outside linebackers and special teams. Our prayers are with Coach Lindsey and his family, and we ask that their privacy be respected. We look forward to his return to the program. LSU opens their fall practice today, Thursday, whenever you're listening to this. One other LSU note, one of the top players in the 2024 recruiting cycle, five-star edge rusher Colin Simmons from the state of Texas, announced he is going to make his decision on August 10th. So that's coming next week. It is thought to be a two-horse race between LSU and Texas, and some of the crystal balls looking like the Longhorns may get him. Some folks think LSU has a really good shot, though, so we will see. He's the Dallas area's number 1 recruit, the number 8 overall prospect in the country, the number 1 overall edge rusher, and the number 1 player out of the state of Texas. He is a force to be reckoned with at Duncanville High School, where he had 22.5 sacks last year. All right, over at Arkansas, Coach Sam Pittman, they're getting their fall camp underway with the Razorbacks, and obviously a new offensive coordinator in Dan Enos. Things looking a little bit different. Pittman said there'll be a more physical premium on offense and more attention to detail. He said, I think you'll see the tight ends are going to be used a lot more this year than before. He said, but when you're in a check offense, and we will do that at times, you're checking because you're saying this is the best look and we're better than you. He said that Georgia was mostly a check offense when he was there, and he said it hopefully means the mind is strong for Arkansas going into this season. Pittman said we needed to be more physical, and in all honesty, the most disappointing thing of last year was not between the 20s. It was inside both 20s, situational football where we just did not execute. So Sam Pittman going on to say, look, we're going to use the tight ends. These guys can run, they can catch. We got 1 or 2 that can be matchup problems if we can get them on the field. So you'll see how KJ Jefferson attacks the field with his tight ends. One other Arkansas note, they picked up a pledge from a 3-star linebacker named Justin Logan on Wednesday, their 17th commitment for the class of 2024. He's the number 448 overall player, the number 40 linebacker, and the number 51 player out of the state of Georgia. Over at Texas A&M, Coach Jimbo Fisher and his quarterback, Connor Wegman, they are hopefully going to take this thing to the next level this year. Obviously, Wegman did not start last year and wasn't the flashiest of QBs, but executed, did his job, and they want to see him take that next step with Bobby Petrino coming in as the offensive coordinator. And Jimbo Fisher, talking with the media, said he not only saw good decisions from Wegman last season, he also saw the rising sophomore looked strong coming out of spring camp. And he said he hopes that translates this fall. And it helps the Aggies have some big-time weapons with Evan Stewart and Anaya Smith back. Jimbo Fisher and Connor Wegman said he will not be hesitant to throw that ball in some areas where he can make plays because he's got some guys who can go and get it. He is going into the fall feeling really good. He said also Wegman had 8 touchdowns with no interceptions. He was making plays last year. When he was making the right decisions, he was very good. At the end of the day, quarterbacking is about making the right decisions and accuracy. So, again, can Connor Wegman take that next step and be one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC this year? We will see. Over at Tennessee, Josh Heupel, obviously he took over a program when it was in flux a couple of years ago. Jeremy Pruitt, of course, fired. We know how all that went down, but Josh Heupel turned this thing around, turned it around quickly. He said, talking with the media this week, he said the change in the roster on day 1 of fall camp this week has changed dramatically compared to where it was 2 years ago. And look, when you look up and down their roster, way more depth on the offensive and defensive lines. And they just did a good job of building that roster up. And you lose a bunch of pieces to the NFL in graduation, but they've done a good job of restocking. So great job there from Josh Heupel these last 2 years there at Tennessee. Over at Kentucky, Mark Stoops and company, they picked up a recruit this week in 3-star edge rusher Steven Souls. He's 6'1" and chose the Wildcats over the likes of South Carolina, Alabama, Miami, and is considered the number 55 edge rusher in this class. And Tim Brando says that he's picking Kentucky to be that surprise team in the SEC East. He was actually on with our buddy Jay Crain and company this week, and he said, look, I'll tell you right now, I think Kentucky finishes second to Georgia in the SEC East this year. He said the big reason is Tennessee's loss of Hendon Hooker, and he said Tennessee is going to be really challenged by the likes of Kentucky, South Carolina, and those other teams in the East that are going to be really good. I think Kentucky is still a factor. A lot of people want to throw dirt on them because they lack imagination. Last year, their offensive line struggled a little bit. I think if they had been a little bit better on the O-line, they would have won 10 games. But Will Levis was running for his life a little bit back there. And just a few more notes in this segment from across the SEC. It's watch list season, and it continues on. We got the Lou Groza Award watch list that goes to the nation's top place kicker. A couple of names from the SEC making this list. Of course, Will Reichert headlines it, the guy who's arguably the greatest kicker in Alabama football history, coming back for another year. Mitch Jeter at South Carolina, Harrison Mevis at Missouri, Alex Rayner from Kentucky. That's a name to keep an eye on. He comes to the Wildcats following a year in which he led the Sun Belt in scoring last year at Georgia Southern. And then also the Ray Guy Award watch list came out honoring the nation's best collegiate punter. Brett Thorson from Georgia, Jay Bramlett from LSU, Kai Kroger from South Carolina making the list. He was at SEC Media Days. Matthew Hayball from Vanderbilt and Nick Constantino from Texas A&M. So just names to keep an eye on there. We'll see if the SEC will boast the best kicker and best punter this year. Keep an eye on those watch lists. And one more note in this segment. Look, you don't kick an anthill, right? Like, why would you do that? You don't want to piss off Nick Saban in Alabama. Well, Texas Longhorns got their fall camp underway this week, and special teams coordinator Jeff Banks, speaking with the media the other day, was asked what he's going to tell his team about playing at Alabama this year in week 2. He had previously coached there, so he has some experience. Here's what Jeff Banks said. He said, quote, "We're just going to play another road game, just as hard as in Kansas and Iowa State as it is going to be in Tuscaloosa. It's just bigger and more people." Jeff Banks, look, man, you're already facing a tough challenge going into Tuscaloosa where opponents rarely win, beating Alabama there. Comparing it to going and saying it's just as hard as going into Kansas and Iowa State, some folks in Tuscaloosa may use that as some bulletin board material. So take that for what Jeopardy category, dumb things for $100. Dumb things to say. Jeff Banks, come on, dude. Do better. You're supposed to say, yeah, it's a brutal place to play. I don't know how we're going to win there. Build it up, dude. Don't compare playing at Alabama to playing at Kansas and Iowa State. It's ridiculous. All right. That is around the conference. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, our conversation with Jay Crain of Crain and Company. That's coming your way in just a sec. Well, first, I want to remind you this episode is presented to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. We're telling you guys about LinkedIn Jobs. If you own a business and you're looking to make some hiring, you got to use our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. Like these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager. You want to be 100% certain that you've got access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you got to go check out LinkedIn Jobs. They are going to help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's very easy to do. You just go to their website, you add your job for free. What it does is it adds a purple hashtag hiring frame to the LinkedIn profile, and that's going to spread the word that you're hiring. People will be able to find you. They got simple tools on there like screening questions, make it easy for you to focus on the right candidates with the right skills that you want to interview and eventually hire. It is why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires against leading competitors. And LinkedIn Jobs, they're going to help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Go post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Again, it's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Go post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Going along here from SEC Media Days, and it's not an SEC Media Days without catching up with our buddy Jay Crain, talking all things SEC football, and good to see you, man. I know it's like every year you come here, you get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Well, number one, it's always great to sit down with you, brother. You know how much respect I have for you. You know, you guys do such a fantastic job, and catch it as much as I possibly can, going through the, millions of iotas of information. But there's nothing like the smell of Radio Row at SEC Media Day. Man, I don't care if it's in Atlanta. I don't care if it's in Nashville, Bangladesh, Bangkok, or Ireland, man. Let's get it going. Let's get this party started.
All right, let's jump into it because I know there's a lot of big storylines this week. Let me start with a couple of quarterback battles. Alabama, I know we're a month out, but
yeah,
this is unusual, man. This feels like uncharted territory. I've got to go back a decade since we've been like at this point before a season, and a Nick Saban team doesn't know who their quarterback is.
Well, it's one of those things. Football is always cyclical, and even with for the GOAT, Nick Saban, who, in my opinion, is the best evaluator of talent that we've ever seen. Kirby's giving him a run for his money, the way they're stockpiling over there and the way they're coming through. But when you look at the quarterback situation, obviously you got to look at the system, bringing in Tommy Rees. And it's always Nick Saban's offense that they're running. A lot of people don't realize that when you're the offensive coordinator at Alabama, I don't care if it was Lane Kiffin or Sark, your terminology has to change to his terminology because it makes practice flow better. You're able to script it better. You're going to call this what we call it. So
right.
when we're scripting and we're going through and we're watching things, we're able to speak the same language instead of, and I've been on staffs, where you've had the same terminology or similar terminology. Now, when you talk about motions and things like that's kind of a different ball game there. But when it comes down to combinations, what you call them, formations, what you call them, when you're on a staff that has different ones, it makes it a lot harder. It's almost like speaking French and German to each other,
right.
and you got to kind of figure out what everybody's saying. Well, how about we just both speak German, or we just both speak French or English? So when you bring in Tommy Rees and you're running this style of system where it's going to be a run-first, play-action, old-school Alabama system, to me, I think it leans more toward Tyler Buckner and Ty Simpson, because Jalen Milroe, his strength is his dual threat ability really to run first at this point, unless he's made some huge strides we don't know about in the throwing game. Now, having said that, and I say the same thing about Robbie Ashford and Auburn, is when you have that type of running ability, you just have to be able to throw the ball well enough. Well, Robbie Ashford's in a much different system
right.
than what Jalen Milroe's in. So I think right now you got to lean toward Buckner or Ty Simpson. The biggest thing that I've noticed, Gordy, and we don't talk about this enough in college football, is roster management. We talk about recruiting a ton. We talk about scheme a ton. In the NFL, what do you hear about? Roster management, roster management, roster management. When was the last time that Alabama had to replace a quarterback and a left tackle in the same year?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's been a long, because those are two symbiotic places, right?
Right.
It's like replacing two defensive ends and a middle linebacker. Those are two symbiotic places. So that's a big question mark. And when you look at Alabama, what was the main cog in taking Alabama to the heights that Nick Saban took them? They were better than you up front. Right? And it's not just your starting five on the offensive line. It's not just the front four on defense. It's the depth. Well, now Georgia has become the new top dog when it comes to the line of scrimmage. Michigan, Ohio State, there's teams that can run with Bama now up front. It's weird not being able to watch Bama run the ball when they know they're going to run it and you know when they're going to run it. And in this system, if they're not able to run the ball at will like we're used to seeing them in the past, this offense is not going to be nearly as explosive as what you've seen. Bryce Young saved them a lot last year. I don't see that happening at quarterback. So when I look at that schedule, I talked about it today. I know they've had 15 straight years of double-digit wins. Depending on that Texas game, week 2 at home, I could see Bama going 9-3 this year, Gordy.
Wow. That's not hyperbole. It's you had Bryce Young and Will Anderson last year, and you still lost 2 games.
True. Look, and that defense, too. It's not like that defense is just rolling people up like it used to. I mean, again, I think Alabama this year, I think it's a transition year. And I would not be shocked if they went 9-3.
Yeah, and you got to think Kevin Steele maybe going to bring some of that aggressiveness that maybe Pete Golding was lacking. And
well, Nick and Kevin, obviously, I mean, Coach Steele's been in the game for as long as Coach Saban has. So it's a little bit different when you have a younger guy and then Nick Saban. It's still Nick Saban's defense. But I think the rapport with Kevin Steele and kind of the leash of letting Coach Steele do what he wants to do is a lot longer from a attack and aggression standpoint, blitz standpoint, whether that be man blitz, whether that be zone blitz, whether that be corner pressures and things like that. I think you'll see them be more aggressive because he trusts Coach Steele a little bit more.
Yeah. And that trust factor, is going to be there. On the other side, Georgia, I mean, look, we look at the schedule. We see it's the roster's loaded. The schedule sets up great. I mean, let me pose it this way. What would be the biggest thing standing in the way of Georgia having an undefeated regular season?
Well, I think Georgia. Look, we're all human beings, and I think Kirby Smart is one of the best. And I hate to use the word manipulate. But that's really what it is. It's training. It's mental training, I think is a better way to put it. He had his players convinced people thought they were going 7-5 last year.
Yeah.
And I always say it doesn't matter. And it was in the business for 9 years. Did it at the Division I level for 6.5 years. It doesn't matter what we think. It matters what those guys in that locker room think. It matters what those guys on that coaching staff thinks. And Kirby has such a pulse on the mental conditioning and mental training of that team, I would not be shocked if he had them convinced they were going 7-5 this year. Because look, new quarterback, Stetson's gone. But when I look at Georgia, and I don't like to use the word easy for a schedule in the SEC. I think you have lighter schedules. I think you have heavier schedules. I don't think easy exists. You do have to go to Tennessee, but if Georgia maintains the way they've been maintaining and they're so good up front, Carson Beck, who I think's the guy, is going to be put in the best situation of any new starting quarterback in the league because you're going to have one of the best offensive lines in the country. That defense just has a bunch of Avengers running around. I mean, if you saw Captain America's shield fly in the background one time, you wouldn't be surprised. And you have the ultimate security blanket in Brock Bowers, who I think is the best player in football that doesn't play quarterback, or the most important, because not only is he a threat in the blocking game, which means he's a threat in the slam and slide screen, throwback screens, things like that. Heck, now screens, you can hand him the ball. He's effective catching the ball. But as an offensive coordinator, if I'm Mike Bobo, that the defense is going to have to game plan for Brock Bowers. You can't double everybody. Right. And then you bring in Dominic Lovett from Missouri, who nobody's talking about for some reason. Ra Thomas from Mississippi State, who's a vertical problem. Lad McConkey, a.k.a. Haru the Great White Ninja. I know you lost A.D. Mitchell, but they return more weapons than Crain right now. So if you're Georgia, you add that light schedule with a new quarterback. Now, I will say, week 4 at Auburn, first true road game, because it's one thing to be the guy that comes in halfway through the year, right? Mm-hmm. It's another thing to be the guy that the whole offseason, they know you're the guy. It's on you. You're the voice. You're the leader. You're going to be him. It's a totally different situation when that happens. So I've got that one circled. Georgia's so much better than Auburn is up front. He should be able to get away with a lot more mistakes than what somebody else in that position, even at Alabama right now, coming in with a new quarterback, could get away with. So I think Georgia is Georgia's biggest enemy. That's what happens when you're better than everybody else up front.
More with Jay Crain in just a second. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Tomorrow on the show, you don't want to miss it. We're going to be talking with Gary Stokan of the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, who's got a new sponsor this year. That's coming tomorrow right here on Locked On SEC. You mentioned Auburn. It almost feels like a year that Hugh Freeze is playing with house money. I think a lot of fans, at least most of the Auburn fans I've talked to, they're not giving him a pass, but they're kind of like, look, we know it's going to take a year or so to settle in. But with all the transfers he's brought in, including Peyton Thorne, who's played a ton of football, could it be Auburn hits the ground running here and does pull off some upsets?
Well, I was talking about this with Oklahoma and the Big 12 the other day, because nobody's really talking about Oklahoma. It's mainly Texas. Will Kansas State repeat? TCU, what they did last year with Sonny Dykes going into year 2. But when I look at Auburn, they don't get the chance to be the underdog a lot. They don't get a chance to be sneaky a lot. This is one of those years. Now, when you look at what the transfer portal's done for not only college football, but for first-year coaches, the old rule of thumb used to be you get 3 years as a head coach to implement your culture. You get 3 recruiting cycles in there to get your depth right and then show great progress. Well, right now, it's been kind of fast-forwarded to 2 years. You look at what's happening with Billy Napier in Florida, some of these other places. But when I look at what Hugh Freeze has done at Auburn, bringing in Peyton Thorne's great. You want an experienced guy back there. Is he the greatest quarterback in the country, the most talented, the most athletic? No. But he's got the unteachable and tangible, and that's experience. He's played in big environments. He's not going to be afraid of the moment. He's not going to be afraid to sit in there and deliver the pill. But I think the biggest thing Hugh's done is getting offensive linemen in here that are proven. And that's where the game is won and lost. I don't care if you run triple option. I don't care if you run the air raid. I don't care if you run some sort of system I've never seen. If you're not good up front, it's not going to work. And bringing in Britt, bringing in Muskrat, the guys from Tulsa, guy from Western Kentucky, the kid from East Carolina at center who's a really good player. You've given yourself a chance. And that's not even talking about wide receiver. That's not even talking about bringing in Caleb Burton from Ohio State. Yeah. That's not talking about all the weapons he's brought in. So offensively, I'm never going to sleep on Hugh Freeze offensively. Then you bring in Phil Montgomery from Tulsa, who's from that Art Briles old school of let's split it out wide. Let's mix up our combinations. Let's use the divider against the defense. If you don't know what the divider is, that's how defenses get lined up in the back end, depending on what formation you come out in, trips, doubles, dice, whatever you want to call it. But when I look at the defense, that's the biggest question mark to me. And it's not in the back end. I like Nehemiah Pritchett. Yeah. Okay. I like DJ James. It's pass rush. You lose Derek Hall. You lost the guys that could get after the quarterback. Now, Marcus Harris, he's got to have a big year. You bring in McLeod. from App State, he's got to have a big year. If Auburn can have a legitimate pass rush, and they don't have to be world beaters, I think 8-4 is a real possibility because look at the out-of-conference games. Should win Cal. The other ones you should really, for lack of a better term, I hate to say this, you should walk through. You should at Auburn because the talent level is that different. Now you go to LSU. You do get Bama and Georgia at home. You go to A&M. If you – I got a sneaking suspicion Auburn can split Bama and Georgia, as crazy as that sounds. One of those two. With the transition, you're probably Bama that Bama's in. Now, we'll see because we know how talented they are. But I do think Hugh Freeze is going to use this sneaky year is what I call it. House money, you can call it whatever you want. I think Auburn has a chance to surprise some people, and this will be the only year they have to do it.
All right, let's get down to brass tacks. Everybody's expecting Georgia to win the East. If Georgia doesn't win the East, who is it? And then on the flip side, I know LSU's getting some run. People still default to Saban and Alabama. If it's not Alabama, is it LSU in the West?
Yeah, I think we're going to come out of media day with LSU being the slight favorite to win the West.
Wow.
Which I don't think's crazy at all. You got Jaden Daniels coming back. You got 2 young tackles, a young offensive line. I like what they have out wide. I think Malik Neighbors is one of the best skill players in college football. You saw what he did as a freshman. Jason Taylor's kid, Mason Taylor there at tight end. Now, when it comes to the East, Georgia, I wonder what the odds are. I need to look at the odds of Tennessee. You would have to say Tennessee because Joe Milton would have figured it out, right? South Carolina's not good enough up front. I know I keep going back to up front, but that's what this game's about.
Yeah.
Offensive
and defensive line.
Offensive line and defensive line. I mean, they couldn't stop a nosebleed in a nurse's office last year on the ground. And on the offensive line, everybody keeps talking about Spencer Rattler. And I get it, right? He's a quarterback. He looked good at the end of the year. Spencer Rattler's going to go as that offensive line goes. If they can't run the ball, it's not going to work. The reason they were able to finish the way they finished and win the amount of games they won with that bad offensive and defensive line was because the special teams was out of this world from Shane Beamer. And you can survive in some games like that. I was a special teams coordinator. I know how it goes. But at the end of the day, the only other team in the East that I can see challenging is Tennessee. And that's if Joe Milton figures out how to throw the changeup. Because just like a Major League Baseball pitcher, it's great you got the fastball, dog. Congrats. You throw 95, if you can't control the changeup, you don't have an off-speed pitch, they're going to hit it off the scoreboard by the third inning once they catch up to it. So I would pick Tennessee just because I think they are better up front than South Carolina is. But outside of that, it's Georgia's to win the East. I think LSU's slight favorite to win the West. Then you'll see Bama in there. And after that, man, there's some big questions. Gordy, you know this. Arkansas and Sam Pittman, man. Like at some point, you're going to have to show the mongoose the snake.
He is Jake Crain. Of course, Crain and Company is the show and always master of the metaphor. We always appreciate him for that. Jake, thanks for the time as always, man. Let people know where they can find your stuff.
Definitely. It's a pleasure to come on here, man. You guys do such a great job. I love being able to see everybody this time of year. Yeah, easiest way, just go to YouTube. It's Crain and Company, Crain, not spelled like the bird. And Company. We go live each weekday morning, 6:30 to 8 a.m. Central. We have live call-ins, live chat. We're heavy college football, heavy NFL as well. That's kind of our bag. But no, man, it's always great to come on. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcast, all that as well.
Jake, thanks for the time as always, man.
Gordy, we got to get you on too, man. We're going to be set up here soon, so we'll chop it up.
Perfect. Thanks, man.
Awesome.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Our thanks again to Jake Crain of Crain and Company. And thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Again, shout out to our everydayers for checking us out. Tomorrow on the show, we'll have more updates from around SEC camps as they get their fall camps underway at more schools, Alabama and Auburn, and of course, LSU hitting the practice field. Tons of schools across the campus will bring you all the headlines and news and notes happening across the SEC. For now, you guys have a great day. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody, right here on Locked On SEC.